All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Hello, George. We'll give everybody a minute or two here before we kick off. Hello, hello. Good afternoon. Good evening.
Wow. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon. Maybe we should just say happy Thursday.
Or almost might be Friday somewhere, right?
Could be.
It probably is.
We've got some from Switzerland. We've got some from Montreal, Denmark, Boise, Idaho. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome.
Brasil.
Early breakfast in Melbourne. Morning.
Well, thank you, everyone. All right. Well, it looks like we've got a quorum here, so I think we can get started. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning to everyone out there. Welcome. My name is Eric Couch. I'm the Director of Sales here at EnterOne. And on behalf of our entire team, I'd like to thank the VMware user group community for having us today. We're thrilled to be a part of this and to share some insights about the most powerful and strategic technology in the VMware ecosystem, the VMware Cloud Foundation. For those of you who might not know us, EnterOne is an authorized VMware by Broadcom education delivery partner. That means we partner trusted to deliver VMware training designed and approved by VMware to customers, partners, enterprise teams around the world. Our focus is helping organizations build real-world expertise across technologies that matter the most, from data center virtualization and networking to automation, cloud, and now VCF. At EnterOne, we combine certified instruction with practical labs, real-world deployment experience, and a personal approach to help learners and organizations accelerate outcomes with VMware technology. With me today, our presenter is Steve Jones, one of our senior instructors and one of the most respected technical trainers in the field. Steve is both a VMware certified instructor and a Cisco certified instructor with more than 17 years of teaching experience across enterprise networking, virtualization, storage, and cloud solutions. He's helped hundreds of organizations modernize their data center, implement automation strategies, and build hybrid cloud infrastructures at scale. In this session, Steve will provide an overview of VCF, what it is, why it's central to VMware's new operating model, and how it simplifies management of compute, storage, networking, and cloud operations through a unified automated platform. So with that, let's dive in. Please join me in welcoming Steve Jones to take us through an overview of the VCF platform. Steve?
All right. Thank you, Eric. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may happen to be. Welcome to our session. I'm going to try to share an overview, as Eric said, of VCF, because VCF is an amazingly powerful platform. It is, and without, I can say unreservedly that it is going to be a big step for a lot of companies to begin this process. The first thing I want to share with you is I want to try to answer a couple of questions that I get from classes, because these are the number one things people want to know. When they're coming into VCF, typically they're already in a VMware environment. We manage vSphere, we manage ESXi, we've been managing it from a term of time. Maybe you've done virtual desktops, maybe you've deployed vSAN. When you look at VCF, VCF is the umbrella, if I can use that term, for all these packages that VMware has released. So a lot of folks look at this and they'll say, well, that's okay, I've been managing vSphere forever. You got to keep in mind, there's a lot more moving parts here than just ESXi. There's a whole lot more here we need to consider. So in that vein, I want to start by putting in some resources that I think are going to be extraordinarily helpful for you as you begin this process. I'm going to be putting them in chat as well. And by the way, there we go. There's my contact information. If you would like to contact me at any point in the future, please feel free. Okay, I do teach a lot of classes. As Eric said, I do professional services engagements as well here at EnterOne, but I will be glad to answer your question. I will get back to you as soon as I can. Okay, so please keep in mind, if you don't hear from me, I will be glad to get back with you. So the first thing that we are looking at is what I consider one of the big pieces of this puzzle, and that being right here, the VCF planning and preparation workbook. Guys, it should have popped up in the chat. Let me resend it. Let me resend those pieces of information because I get so many questions. Okay, well, if this is so much different than ESXi, what do I need to know about? Well, this is the number one thing, right? Where do you want to go in the next 24 to 36 months? And I want you to be honest about your data center. What are your applications going to look like? Are you going to be consolidating data centers? Are you going to be using existing storage for your primary storage? Are you going to be using fiber channel? Are you going to be using NFS? Or are you going to be converting over to vSAN? These are all concerns we need to think about. This is planning, right? That's the big thing. This is planning, and planning to me is 90% of the deployment of our environment. So I'm going to put this in the chat. There we go. I want to bring this up because, again, I think this is foundational. This is what it looks like. As you can see, there are multiple tabs down here at the bottom of this Excel spreadsheet. But what we're going to do with the customer, if I were to come to your location, is we would have a kickoff meeting where we start to discuss these values. And then I would go into my planning, and I would go into my domain sizing, how many nodes, very in depth, because this is critical. A, you've got to understand where you're going from an application perspective. Secondly, you've got to be aware, does my hardware match? Is it on the compatibility guide? And so the compatibility guide is right here. And again, I've already copied these links out. The compatibility guide is where we check to verify that our hardware has actually been tested and validated by Broadcom. Now, people ask me all the time, you mean I can't just go to Newegg and piece my new servers together? No, you can do that. Absolutely, you can do that. Here's the problem. If you have a problem or a service issue later on, think about it. Where are you going to get tech support? Because that's the enterprise question. Most of us in here are dealing with this on a large scale. This isn't like we're building a home lab. Home labs, we can piece that together and make it work. Yeah, that's fine. When you're supporting applications that have to be on 24/7 and you have something that's incompatible, that has an issue, where are you going to get support? Because VMware will help you with the VMware side. They may not have any information at all on an ASUS motherboard. So I always encourage, A, let's walk through this worksheet that you see right here, and I've already put the link in chat. Let's work through this. This is where you get together with your colleagues and you think about, okay, this is a roadmap, 24, 36, 48 months. Where do we want to go? Because I'm finding there are customers that are not only transitioning here, they're also transitioning their upstream network. They're updating their access layer switches. They may be going from 10 to 25. Now they're going to 40 and 100 gig. I've talked to customers that are doing a complete rip and replace on 64 gig fiber channel because their application is saturating 64 gigs fiber channel. They're going to 400 gig iSCSI. So these are all things that we need to think about because ultimately it's supplying the hardware that we're going to need for this. So long range, what do your applications look like? So here is the worksheet. I would strongly advise you to think about this because I run into it so many times. We get into the middle of a deployment and they will say, well, we don't know. We haven't had that discussion yet. Guess what? That's time we're wasting. Okay, so please spend the time and fill out this spreadsheet. Mandatory. Okay, this is where you're going to be making decisions with your colleagues about the direction of your data center. And I can almost guarantee this is going to be something that's going to influence your hardware selection as well. Because many of you are going to be looking at new hardware to do this, whether you're going with new Gen 11 HPs, whether you're going with new M8s and M9s for Cisco, irregardless, we need to think about, is this going to be compatible with the new version? Because I don't want to make this major investment of time and effort in doing this upgrade if I have to do a hardware upgrade in 6 months. Okay, so please consider that. So having left those two out there, let's go ahead and take a look at this overview. And by the way, please put questions in chat. If you have any questions whatsoever, Eric is manning the chat. He will be glad to address your questions. And if necessary, he's going to simply forward them to me, and I will either answer them live or we will email back to you, whichever is going to work best at the time. All right, so I can get you, Eric, I'll leave that. We have a question. Can we get this deck emailed to us? I'll leave that up to you. I'm going to forward that to you from the operations team side.
We'll take care of that.
All right, awesome. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at this, because this is actually the first part of our class that we do called VCF Test Drive. It's a 2-day test drive that we use to get folks acclimated into the new environment, to basically help them make the transition from vCenter and vSphere and get them into the let's see, do we have plans for making courses in Europe for VCF 9? Yes. Eric can get back with you on that. He is the scheduler information for courses, so he will help you with that, Lars. Thank you very much. All right, so let's get into the very basic parts here. We're going to determine some very basic terms, but again, these are terms that confuse a lot of individuals. A physical server can also be called a host, a node, or a blade, any or all of those, okay? And you'll see that across all of Broadcom's documentation. The VCF installer is how we are going to install this. You'll notice that there are some marked changes from Cloud Builder VM that we were using to deploy the software defined data center manager and all of our components, NSX, vCenter, ARIA operations, etc. I've already showed you the deployment parameter sheet. This, to me, this is one of VMware's keys to the kingdom. If you will spend time doing your research, doing your evaluation, doing your investigations, I think you'll find that this install and this management will go much, much, much easier. We're going to talk about the bring up process, network pools, workload domains. Now, keep in mind, there are two different types of domains here, and this is consistent with VCF 5. We have what is called a management domain, and that's the concept that you have what we would have called in the past a management cluster, where things like vCenter, NSX Manager, SDDC Manager, ARIA operations, all of those management appliances from VMware are running on separate, segregated servers. So if there is an issue with the production cluster or clusters, the management is still available and accessible. Once we've created that management domain, we can then create up to 22 workload domains, which is, as their name implies, is where our applications run. These can be Kubernetes containers, they can be virtual machines, whatever you need. This could be massive desktop pools. Again, it's whatever you need. We have Lifecycle Manager, which I think brings a huge new role to this. If you're familiar with VMware, as Eric said, I've been teaching VMware for a little over 17 years now, and we've always had this tool called Update Manager. Update Manager did a really nice job of letting us know when there are updates, when there are new packages, new features, new hardware support binaries out there. We could download them and add them to our ESXi servers. That's been great for a time, but now we've stepped into that next generation. Because in addition to being able to patch and upgrade and do security updates, now we also have firmware that we can put into place. So now we're managing a much more standardized configuration of our servers. Not only software, now we're getting into the firmware. And so now we can create this standardized image across all our cluster nodes so we know that everything is configured identically. Now, let's take that concept one step further. Now I'm going to move on to the next piece. We also have within VCF operations the idea that we have configuration drift. In other words, it's looking at that cluster configuration. If someone were to go into one of those cluster nodes and add a standard switch, if they were to change an NTP server, if they were to upgrade anything on that server, it will automatically be recognized by VCF operations and tell you through a centralized console. Let me ask you this question. How would you know that configuration drift had happened in your environment today unless you're using this particular type of idea? That's important to you if you have compliance. HIPAA, Sarbanes-Oxley, DoD networks, all those require compliance for security. This will tell you when something's been changed and you can remediate it. So there's some really cool aspects of this. Yes, while it's part of an overall umbrella application, you can find some really nice areas where we can apply this at a niche level. Then there is the serviceability and support tool. This is a component that helps us troubleshoot. It helps us gather information. It helps us get just a little bit more pieces out there and gather that information and keep everything consistent. It's going to help us troubleshoot, in other words. All right, let's see here. All right, so we're getting some questions. Does Lifecycle Manager supersede host profiles? Okay, if you're familiar with host profiles, and for those of you that are not, let me fill in a little bit of blanks here. Starting with vSphere 5, there was this concept of a host profile whereby we could create what I call a blueprint or a golden copy of an ESXi configuration on a server. I could go into vCenter and I could capture that configuration in a file stored in the vCenter database called a host profile. Now I could take a brand new server completely out of the box. I could apply just the basic ESXi hypervisor. I add it to my vCenter instance, and then I apply the host profile, and vCenter will configure that server identically. It will prompt me for things like IP address, subnet mask, default gateway, DNS, anything that involves networking, but it will configure that identically. But in answer to your question, it goes into what's called Configuration Manager. So it does supersede it, but there's a new version of it of host profiles called Configuration Manager for ESXi or for ESX9. Yes. Yeah, it's going to be the next iteration of that. All right, so let's get into VCF 9. So what I want you to consider here, again, this is your umbrella. Instead of us having multiple different windows open at all times, multiple different browser tabs, what if we could see all the aspects of our vSphere environment through a single pane of glass? And when I say all aspects, I'm talking the ARIA suite, ARIA operations, ARIA orchestrator, ARIA automation, operations for networks, operations for logs, NSX manager. This is all going to be pulled into one pane of glass. I can manage all my passwords from inside VCF operations. All of them. I can manage all my certificates globally. Yes, very much a top level view of everything. Yes, but if you choose, you can also drill down to a very granular level. Yeah, absolutely. But it's a unified approach here. And I think this is something VMware's been working toward, because if you think back before VCF 9 really hit the market, we were managing things, but we had everything through different browser tabs. VMware's just simply said, hey, why don't we get rid of these browser tabs? Let's make this simple. We don't need all this. What if we could give this a more consistent view? And I think that's what they've done. They've done a pretty good job of it too. I'll give them credit. They have done a very good job of planning this. But keep in mind that no matter where we go up here, this still revolves around our hardware. Physical compute, that would be CPU, memory, and now GPUs. Don't forget, GPUs are now playing a very significant role in our workloads, whether it be desktop offload, whether it be use for AI. I've worked with customers that are using GPU cards for graphics offload for engineering teams, AutoCAD. I've worked with people that are using, and this is sort of the outlying group, but I've done online gaming teams where they're using GPU offload to help them model games, model characters, do the animation. So this splits a plethora of different solutions. One thing that I've noticed about VCF is VCF can take you where you want to go. Is there an automated CA with the MS server? Okay, so if you remember back in 6.7, there was a separate entity called a Platform Services Controller that was installed as part of the installer package for vCenter. The Platform Services Controller was deployed first. vCenter was deployed second. Platform Services Controller performed certificate information. It handled our licensing. It handled authentication. So that's now been brought in. I think there is an automated CA with Microsoft. Yes, you can, because we can now, since we've moved that Platform Services Controller in to VCF, I think it can provide its own CA. It can work with a third-party CA, and I think you can use Microsoft's CA. You can use Okta. You can use Pinniped. You can use several different third parties for authentication as well. So I think so, yes. I think so, yes. But notice every bit of this, and this is why I emphasize that deployment worksheet so strongly at the outset of our discussion. Notice everything hinges on the hardware we provide. So we have to understand fundamentally, what are we going to run here? Why are we doing this? Is this going to be for a test dev team? I've had customers that deployed VCF and it doesn't connect to any upstream networks. It's completely self-contained. They have about 4, 5, 8 servers. They connect them together. They create the domain, and now the developers themselves log in and they manage everything. They manage the entire environment. It's not even connected to the physical production network, but they use it for test dev. They use it to develop new applications. So this is a very much a fluid design. Where do you want to go? Paulo, I think you're correct. I think you need the correct certificate template. Yes. So we have automation. Now, this is one of the big drawbacks. I will mention this is one of the biggest drawbacks I get when I do a VMware class. I'm not sure if I'm comfortable with automation. Okay. You can still point and click like you always have. You can use a mouse. VCF operations will take you wherever you want to be within that platform. But at the same time, if you want to bring automation into this at some degree, you can absolutely do that. It's a comfort level. Many of you are using PowerShell today, or you're using API sets to manage vSphere, to manage your vCenter, to manage your NSX. You're already programmatically using it. Why not use the tools that are compatible with and written alongside the VMware components? I'm not saying PowerShell is negative. I've used PowerShell for 10, 15 years. But there are better tools that are written around the VMware hypervisor that's going to give me better access. Because honestly, everything you can do in vCenter, you can do in automation if you want. So the question becomes, where do you want to use it? Where do you want it to take you? Operations, I will say unreservedly. Again, I've taught this class when it was first started out as vCenter Operations Manager. This is the best tool, the best to manage your VMware environment. And I'll give you an example. In a lot of your areas, I'm not going to ask for a raise of hands, because I know we'll probably get a pretty good percentage of people would say, yep, that I fall into that category. How many of you have got VMs that are too big? In other words, they've got far more CPU and memory resources than you really need to run that workload. Most of us probably do. How many of you have virtual machines that nobody's logged into for 6 months or more, and yet they're powered on? They could be a security hole, and at worst case scenario, they're consuming your data store space. Operations will actually associate with vCenter. It will pull the information out of the vCenter database, and it will actually show you these elements. It will show you VMs that need to be resized. It will show you VMs that have not even been used for X amount of days, months, or years. You choose the time window. This helps you manage your environment more efficiently by simply helping you, A, optimize initially. Going forward, it monitors your resource consumption. And it will tell you, oh, by the way, this data store is going to be full in approximately 47.3 days. Folks, that is invaluable information when you're talking about managing a large-scale enterprise. Most of us don't have time to go in every day and spend all day looking at current resources. We're putting out fires. We're building deployments. We're servicing customers. What if we could simply open up Operations Manager and look at it? It's going to show you inefficiencies within your environment. It is an awesome tool for that. If you used it for nothing more than configuration optimization and cleaning up your environment, you've made a huge dent in your management day. But it keeps going. It begins to show you events. It begins to show you trending information, things that are changing. And it helps you respond before they become an outage. In essence, you're going to be turning your IT into a proactive effort, not waiting for the help desk to call, which is the most common answer I get. How do you find a problem within your IT? Oh, we just wait for the help desk to call. What if we could address it before it becomes an issue? And that's what operations enables. It brings a tremendous set of tools to the table. There is a set of labs that I'm going to put here in the chat window I give in every one of my VMware classes. This is VMware's hands-on labs. You can see it in the chat, hol.vmware.com. If you want to try any of these pieces, maybe you're still in the discovery phase. Maybe you're saying, you know what, we're thinking about going into the VCF world. We're in the sort of planning stages. Do yourself a favor, go to that URL, hol.vmware.com, and kick the tires on the product. This is true product. These are the labs you get at VMware Explorer. I use them. I've referred students to them for 15 years. They are excellent. They are free. The only thing you need is a Broadcom ID. And that's only used to track your progress. So they will never send you spam. They don't send you sales opportunities. They don't send you anything like that. This is there simply to track where you've been within the lab structure itself. Please take the time, walk through that. You will find it is tremendous tool, and it's all free. And this covers everything VMware makes. And they are constantly adding new labs out there. Comments or questions at this point? Okay, chat is clear. All right. So now that we've begun this discussion, we started having these planning phases. We've done all the whiteboards. We've gathered our information. We've looked at our existing hardware. We need to think about what is this going to look like. Okay, so as I said, the first thing we're going to deploy is our management domain. The management domain currently with VCF 9 uses Fiber Channel, NFS, and vSAN. Now, I get a lot of questions, and I'm going to answer these out front. VxRail is supposed to be available as a primary storage, or what VMware calls a principal storage, in version 9.1. Okay, I do not have any sort of release date. So if you're interested in that, you're using VxRail. Yes, they are. We had a question. Are the HOL time-limited labs to complete? Yes, they are. Yes, they are. The question here is, what about iSCSI? Right now, iSCSI is something they're working on, but it's not fully released. They will use Ethernet storage in the form of NFS, but iSCSI right now, at least from the road mapping that I've seen, it's one of those futures. But again, if you have any questions like this, where you're saying, okay, we're thinking about going to VCF 9. We want to use this. When do you think that's going to be? That your sales engineer will be able to help you with that. He or she has the roadmap. Unfortunately, we don't have the roadmaps here in the education side. So check with your sales teams. They will be glad to check with you and give you a full report on that. I know I just checked yesterday. I know VxRail is coming in 9.01 because I checked on that yesterday. For those of you that are in Nutanix, okay, I know there are, Nutanix is now on the list. Awesome, Andy, thank you. For Nutanix, right now, and Nutanix is going to be considered supplemental storage. The programming and the API calls between VCF and Nutanix are still in the development stage. You can use Nutanix as secondary storage, and but as far as principal storage, not yet. Let's see. Mike says you can convert existing vSphere, vCenter to iSCSI. Yeah, you can convert. That's another big piece of the puzzle. Yeah, you can actually convert existing vCenter instances now and add them in as separate domains. and it's all scripted. It's all orchestrated. What happened to NVMe TCP? It has to be N.0.1. Okay, I think that's the next release. But we've started with this particular management domain, right? This is where all my management appliances are going to be. Now, through orchestration, we're going to get into production. And notice I've got different workloads domains here. I've got one for production. I've got one for private AI. It is also one for Kubernetes. We can have up to 22 different workload domains with one management domain. We've got a lot of flexibility as to how we push this together. Let's see. So vSAN is not mandatory with workload deployment. No, it is not. It's an option, but it is not mandatory. It is not mandatory. I would strongly recommend that you try it and consider it because it's developed with VMware. It's developed internally. So anytime a new update, a new security patch, whatever would come out new for vSAN is also tested against vCenter and against VCF. You don't have to worry about any sort of compatibility issues there. Whereas if you're doing with something like a Dell EMC array or something like that, you might very well have compatibility issues once it comes up. And I used to teach for EMC. So just keep in mind, you definitely remove the compatibility issues and things like that when you start thinking about the vSAN option. All right, but notice again, this is a continuous process, right? What if I need to add resources? We just either add them and import them into the inventory, or I add new servers into my vCenter instance. We commission them, which means we're going to bring them now into the VCF inventory, and now I can add them to these clusters as needed. You can scale up as you need. You can scale out as you need. The question with VCF becomes, what resource do you need? Do you need to add memory? Do you need to add NICs? Do you need to add GPU cards? What do you need to add? This is an environment that grows. It depends upon your workload, and it's very individualistic, but you can mature this and grow this as your applications change. And I think that's a huge advantage for us. Now, as we look at this, if you do go into vSAN, okay, and again, some of you are probably thinking about vSAN, you may already be there. We can implement this as a stretched cluster, which means I could have part of my environment at site A, a part of it at site B, as long as we're connected with a very low latency link, 5 milliseconds round trip. My stretch cluster can support that quite easily. And we can manage that through VCF9 operations. I can manage this as an edge environment. This is one of the fastest growing implementations. This is what we call the Internet of Things. And every time I mention Internet of Things, people ask me, oh, really, are you talking to your coffee maker again? Or are we talking about the microwave? No, this is where we're getting into what we would call assembly lines. You're talking about controlling paint robots. You're controlling assembly robots. You're controlling welders. You're controlling cameras in a casino or in a downtown area. You're using those for facial recognition and security. We got a question here. Since each workload domain brings its own vCenter appliance, is there a strong, compelling reason to keep those workload domains isolated? Or is it reasonable to cohabitate when the same customers are consuming a mix of prod, private IA use cases? Each one would be a different cluster within one shared workload, perhaps by line of business. To me, it would come down, John, excellent question. Thank you. To me, it would come down to, is there any sort of auditing compliance that you're under? Something like where you're considering your HIPAA or Sarbanes-Oxley, payment card industry, something like that. Unless it's an auditing option and you really need to keep that data separated all the way from in essence, what we used to call VM to spindle. If you really need to keep that separated, you might go that route and keep it separated. Or if not, maybe simply for ease of use, you might want to bring them all under the same header. And you have one team that manages the overall VCF environment and then delegate permissions as needed to each of the individual workload domains. You can really do that based upon your security needs around there. We got this question. Let's see here. Is NSXT mandatory with the workload domain? Yeah, I would recommend it. I think the VMware will tell you it's mandatory, and that's simply because you can take advantage of the tier one gateways that would be able to manage your traffic east-west. You don't necessarily have to have a T0 gateway where it interfaces with the physical network. However, NSXT allows you to manage all your firewall rules. It's the foundation for the vDefend firewall. It's really the foundational piece for our IDS and IPS solutions for network intelligence. It does bring a lot to the picture, and you're going to get it anyway. If you're buying VCF 9, you're going to get the package. So I think I'll leave it up to you. Theoretically, you could do it with just standard switches, but you're making a tremendous trade-off in features and functionality and security when you go back to a standard switch as opposed to those options that are available with a distributed switch. So I think simply for the functionality piece, VMware is going to recommend, you know what, you've already bought this. It's part of the VCF umbrella. You might as well go ahead and take advantage of these new features. So I would strongly recommend that you do it. Yeah, I think that's going to be a big bonus for us. All right, excellent questions, folks. Thanks. Keep it coming. So our management domain, again, it's going to be our primary. It's going to be the first thing that we really deploy. And some people ask me, well, should it be my top of the line servers? You can make a strong case for that because ultimately, I mean, that's where your management's going to live. You would probably want NVMe storage. You're probably going to be running ESX9. You're probably going to have the latest and upgraded pieces there. But I can also see if you go back on the hardware compatibility list, you can actually go back to vSphere 8 and add vSphere 8 instances as workload domains. So if you need to keep something at ESX8 for compatibility, then yeah, you can do that. And then maybe once that application or that need's no longer there, you can upgrade that cluster to 9, but it's not an immediate transition that has to happen. So there is our management domain, and then we can create our workload domains. Okay, we talked about those two terms. A VCF fleet is a new term that they've really released that is just one or more VCF instances. It'll have a VCF operations instance. There will be a common automation instance, but now we can begin to allocate permissions. It's RBAC, role-based authentication, role-based access control. So now I do have let's see, we're a small company with 5 hosts. Can I use the management domain for all my workloads? Yes, you can. You can create a consolidated domain. Yeah, you can use them all within one rack. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. There's no such set thing that says they have to be completely separate hosts. No. I have multiple vCenters, management prod, VRA test. Could I have just one vCenter, or will each workload domain have its own? Or that let me think about that. You could run them all under one umbrella vCenter. And I would respond, here's my question, and I hate doing this because I never like to answer a question with the question. Do you need separate permission sets for that? Do you need to have separate permissions for management, for prod, for VRA test? If not, you could probably run them all into the same vCenter. Absolutely. The management domain needs to be at 9 and vSphere at 9. You're exactly correct. You're exactly correct. Where does the VCF fleet run? They run on your clusters. They run on your actual cluster nodes. So it would be whether you want to separate your workload domain hardware-wise. In other words, different physical servers. Do you want to separate that from the hardware that's running your management applications? vRealize automation. There are no dummy questions here. VRA is the VMware. Yeah, it's now called ARIA automation, by the way. It's just a marketing term. So the VCF fleet is basically an instance of a workload domain that's going to be running alongside your management domain. Eric, we are at that magic time. I'm going to hand this back over to you. We are running out of time. So Eric, I'm going to hand this back over to you to wrap up our session.
Say it ain't so. We were having such a good time.
I know we had excellent questions this time.
I know. Well, thanks everybody for thanks Steve for the excellent overview, and we really appreciate all the great interactions with Steve, and your questions really bring a lot of color to the engagement. Once again, EnterOne, we're an education delivery partner. We offer the entire portfolio of VMware training and certification courses. As we've recently partnered with VMUG to work with the members on enhancing training. So reach out to your VMUG folks, and they can help you and connect with us and get lined up for some training and receive a little bit of a discount. We are also, as many of you know, we're giving away a free class today. So thank you all for attending. The VMUG team will be conducting that drawing today. You will receive an email from from somebody at VMUG regarding the free seat and instructions on how to redeem that. But once again, on behalf of EnterOne and Steve, we really appreciate the opportunity to speak with all of you, and all the great questions we got during this. And thank you so much for your time, and look forward to seeing you in another event or in one of our classes coming soon. Great. Thank you all.
A refrigerator to an Eskimo. Oh, I may be in the wrong line of work. Thank you, sir. Have a great day. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Have a great day. Enjoy the rest
Thank
of your
you.
day at VMUG.